Aren't you tired of conceding stupid goals? Well, watch this training guide video that I've made with Barry, OG of PES and the football community right now. I feel like for goalkeepers, what you need to train first is their awareness, and second is reflexes.
Well, I think catching and parrying is going to be irrelevant, because if you're playing, I don't know if there's ever been a case where you've been playing a game and your goalkeeper's made a save and then he just keeps a clean sheet for the whole game if you're playing against somebody good. Because usually if I get a chance one-on-one, I usually finish it. Not saying I'm a beast or anything, but it's so easy to score in this game when you're one-on-one, especially with the meta players and stuff. So yeah, you are right. Most of the players that they have here, we've Petr Cech up here and training him in real time here. I think the biggest thing with it is that it's something me and you have talked about before, way back when, Alex, is a tall goalkeeper. The rule of thumb seems to be that you train up. You kind of don't need to worry too much about his reach or his jumping. Do you know what I'm saying? Because he doesn't need to jump as high, obviously, because he's got longer limbs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for the animations, it's not as important.
Yeah, and the animations that click in when a goalkeeper is tall, they're the animations that you need to kind of try and force into a shorter goalkeeper like Casillas or Sommer or whatever. But with Petr Cech, you are right. Once you can get the awareness and probably I would say the reflexes to about 90, that's going to be where you want to go with him. And then anything above that then is going to be a bonus. The awareness, the reflexes, the reach and the jumping isn't as important on Cech, I would say.
I don't have the boosted version of Cech that you have, but for me, the legendary epic card, it was it's so hilarious. The amount of howlers that he made and considered the type of goals between the legs, P-rollers, actual, that's not even a shot, but he managed somehow to concede. And I feel that's when you can't really, my hands are tied, I can't do anything. If the game wants me to concede, I will concede a goal then.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and not a single build will solve. There's also a myth about the goalkeepers. Let's maybe bust that myth. If your goalkeeper has fighting spirit, does it improve the goalkeeper's performance?
Some people say that it does. I mean, some people say that it does. But to be honest with you, it's kind of like putting one-touch pass on the goalkeeper as well. It's I just feel personally with the goalkeepers, I don't ever pay too much attention. You're going to concede goals no matter what. It doesn't matter if you've got Schmeichel in goals or you've got Onana in goals. It's irrelevant really, in my opinion, because I've never been in a match where I'm I lost that game because of his goalkeeper. It's I think the game is nearly too easy to score now. So for Cech, what I've kind of gone for then would be I've got 98 into awareness, 92 into catching, 85 into parrying, 96 into reflexes, and 90 for goalkeeper reach. But the big thing with Cech there, and, people watching this will be able to see it. The big thing with Cech is the fact that, because he's so tall straight off the rip, you don't need to put much into his aerial strength, or you don't need to put much into his jumping. Do because he's 196 cm. Whereas if you're training up somebody like Casillas or Sommer, who was the free Sommer there, Sommer is going to have a lot of different stuff, but he's going to be shorter. He's only going to be 183 cm. So that's kind of where the discrepancy comes. You're going to have to try and get the jump up as high as possible with the likes of Sommer compared to the likes of Cech, strictly because of their height, And I know we'll talk about the likes of Rijkaard and Patrick Vieira later on, but to simplify it for people watching or listening, it's kind of like playing Makelele in midfield versus Vieira in midfield.
So let's move on to the defenders. So I know there is that's something I want you to shed some light as well on. Depending on the playstyle you're playing. Konami is giving you some nice free defenders, but usually they're destroyers. You play long ball counter. I switched to possession recently just because I just didn't want to be that passive, and it's not like I'm competing at the highest level of this possession, but I'm beating decent opponent, and I feel it is exciting because I actually have a lot of possession. But with that playstyle, and with your playstyle, would it be wise to play destroyer? And how many destroyers can you play in your center back in this center back pairing, for instance?
This is a tough one because everyone you ask is going to have a different opinion. I can only say with my own playstyle, I found having one passive defender and one aggressive defender is kind of the best for me. So even if we take the likes of Jimenez, you remember that free Jimenez card that came out? I think it was a nominated contract one, was it?
Yeah,
so
it's a nice card.
Yeah, it was from a while back. But his stats, you have here, defensive awareness and tackling 92, aggression 94, and defensive engagement 93. And then you're going to have the speed around 84 or 85 if you have a good manager or you have Ten Hag. So what a lot of the destroyers do is they're super aggressive. They're not as passive, but they're also faster on the pitch. So that's why they move out of position a bit. So I personally wouldn't play 2 destroyers at the back if I'm playing a flat 4. If you're playing somebody like Jimenez, I would, or Maldini or Aldair, any of those, they're going to be destroyers. I kind of look at them as kind of guys that are going to actually go and get me the ball. Whereas like if you look at the likes of Van Dijk or Build Up or players like that, they're kind of like stopping the ball when it comes to them, if that makes sense. So one is going actively looking, pursuing the ball, and one is waiting for the ball to come to them to tackle. So it's kind of 2 sides of the same coin. So if you have one that's strong at one area and the other beside him that's strong at another area, that's kind of where you go. And then also on top of that, I would usually put my passive CB beside my attacking fullback and my aggressive CB beside my defensive fullback. If you want to just listen, we can overcomplicate this as much. It can be very complicated.
There's also a preference to have like left-footed center back on the left center back position and right-footed on the right. If you have the option, if you have a left-footed center back, just because it is easier for them to spread the play to the left and to the right, respectively. Also, speaking about the pace, so I think that is actually dependent a lot on the play style. So if you play something like long ball counter, where your defensive line is sitting so deep, you don't need that much speed on your players. So you can't forget about speed, acceleration, and boost your defensive awareness, because defensive awareness is where it's at. And I feel like regardless of the updates in the future, it will still be relevant to have like at least, I feel like in today's standards, when there are so many overpowered cards, 90 is not cutting it. You need to have 95 defensive awareness at least.
I agree. It depends on your playstyle. That's a big point as well, because if you play long ball counter and you're talking about bringing in individual instructions and stuff, that obviously can override a lot of what the players behave like. You talk about network connection and all that sort of stuff and latency. But if you go into training mode and you just look at how the players react, that is 90% of the time how they're going to react. So they'll make a certain run or they'll position themselves in a certain area. And then if they don't be included in the play, they'll recycle that. So they're constantly recycling their animations the whole time. So as you mentioned there with Maldini, like if you look at the comparison between Bastoni, yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I'm sure you've seen, Alex, as well, some games where like your players just don't do what you want them to do. Do you know what I mean?
I feel like at times there are holes in that. That's why I stopped playing destroyers, because I feel like there are holes in my defense. And my opponent is not doing anything extraordinary, but out of sudden, every single pass is going through. And it's just like on mobile, it might be a little bit different. But I also played on PS5 and I felt like I know what I'm supposed to do. I know the difference between matchup, between pressure, but at times it's just like you can't switch in time because opponent is performing one-touch pass area of football that is so effective on both platforms, and I think it's very reliable. That's why all people are playing over counter, just because your defense is sitting deep, not committing, and then is letting your opponent make a mistake.
Well, like if you're using Maldini, like I have the build up on screen that you'll see here, and it's literally like very little into acceleration and speed. Like his speed is hitting around the 85 mark, but then the rest of his defensive stats, that's going to be the bulk of where you put it, because I want him to be like my kind of tigerish midfielder or my tigerish centre back. So like all his stats, his lowest stat with the manager boost and with his own boost is going to be 95 aggression. He's got defensive awareness at 98, tackling and defensive engagement at 99. So, you know, it's pretty much, there's nowhere to go with it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the ultimate style of player.
Yeah.
And then if you have somebody like Bastoni, what I've done with Bastoni then is, even though he's still at like fairly okay speed, it's going to be more about his defensive awareness. Now, obviously, you're comparing a booster, a premium card, to a free card that Konami gave you. So the stats aren't going to fully align.
Low body strength is also like responsible for mainly pace and stamina, right? So maybe stamina isn't good to have, of course, on a center back, but they also have fighting spirit, most of the defenders. That is kind of compensating for them being tired and performing still well. But at the same time, I would rather have good acceleration on a defender who is playing in normal counter play styles, because they're going to be facing situations when they don't need to run at a distance, rather than having like a quick burst into a certain area to intercept the ball. When it comes down to playstyles like possession and quick counter where your defensive line is high, I would probably be adding more speed, because they will be facing a situation where they need to catch up with the pacey winger. Regarding of the updates, I feel like defensive awareness is going to be still the main stat and the king for center backs. So let's talk about maybe right and left backs, and we have a premium left back in Roberto Carlos, who is attacking player. Let's talk about attacking players. Do you really play attacking fullbacks in Lombo counter in general, like 4-3 formations?
Carlos and those type of cards, like Carlos, Maldini, Aldair, any of those cards that go to nearly 100 overall, they're not really going to have a weakness. So you can train them where they have like 80, 90 speed, 90 acceleration, 90 balance, like 80 passing, 80 tight possession, 80, 85, 86 dribbling, and then have the aggression stat really high as well. So I think where Carlos comes into his own is you are basically, if you're playing Carlos, you're essentially defending with your 3 centre back or your 3 defenders, your other 3 defenders, so your 2 CBs and your right back, and then also one of your DMFs in midfield. Like some people might prefer to have a left back that is able to defend, like what you're saying there, because your attacks are coming from either a more central position, which is kind of the meta, or else you're leaving your winger or your wide player up front to do a lot more of the heavy lifting. Whereas with me, with Carlos, I would usually include Carlos in probably 5 or 6 attacks every game, regardless, that kind of way. So, like I have the build up for Carlos here, and it's more about like speed and acceleration than defending. He's only got 78 defensive awareness. He has 90 aggression, but that's more for, as you said, with the track back. You could kind of get away with having track back on him if you're playing him as a left midfielder or you're playing him a little bit more. I don't think Carlos is fighting spirit. I'm just checking. So that would be another skill to throw on him, as you said there. Fighting spirit is brilliant on all cards. It's kind of like one touch pass.
What you can do is on console, you can attribute certain instructions to a player. That's something that we can do over here.
Yeah. See, that overrides a lot of stuff, like, because if I build a player that's a left back, you can then throw like I'd usually throw defensive on Carlos, so that Carlos, when I lose the ball, Carlos just wants to stay up, and like Carlos is the type of player in the game that, like, he's kind of like those guys that wear white boots, playing football, that they like the flashy stuff, but they don't want to get stuck in. So you kind of have to force Carlos to kind of go back and defend, actually, every now and again, So that's what I would do. But obviously that's a console thing as well, that you can actually override a lot of the animations and the set patterns that the players do. 90% of people will understand that, like, if you're using a left back to build your attacks, you're going to be a little bit open on that left back position if you lose the ball. Do you know, that kind of way? So a lot of people don't do that. They'll just boot the ball to their winger or else to their attacking midfielder or CMF, and they'll run the ball or pass the ball up the lines.
Yeah, that's what I want in my Cancelo. So I built him in a way where he can dribble it in mid-80s. Yeah. He can cross. So for my liking, low pass is nice in 80 plus, but a lofted pass for players who are going to be crossing a lot, if you like this type of gameplay, I feel like 85 plus is good. 85 plus with the manager boost, I feel like it's nice. And then the rest of the points are boosting his acceleration, speed, and defensive abilities. So Cancelo, I think he's like in mid-75s in terms of defending, but he has these additional skills on him that make him a very good card. So if you really want to have someone attacking on your right and left flank, but I would suggest maybe regardless of the playstyle, have like one defensive fullback. What I feel like your team is built like that.
Oh, Wan-Bissaka's the GOAT, man. Yeah, he's the GOAT. I think he's the best. Well, apart from Bergomi, if you're talking about Bergomi, the homie, and Dixon. Like, Dixon is really good as well. But even there's a lot of standard GP players that you could buy that will do a job for you. Like, the standard Wan-Bissaka card is still pretty much, unless you're going for Division 1 rank, like, you can get up to Division 1 with standard Wan-Bissaka. Marquinhos is another card. Koundé is another card that you can play right back. But yeah, Wan-Bissaka, like, I think he's unreal. Like, he's just so good. And of course, it goes back to that destroyer conversation again then as well, of like having a CB destroyer like we looked at with Maldini and players like that. So you have really high speed, really high acceleration for a right back, but then his tackling and aggression are just maximized. Do you know what I mean? So like my build of Wan-Bissaka here, 95 speed, 85 acceleration, 96 aggression, 99 tackling, and 99 defensive engagement. Do you know? So if I can't defend with him, you know what I mean? It's like he literally, man, I just literally leave the controller down because the game is so defensively assisted. I leave the controller down sometimes and just be, scratching my head, just looking at him win the ball back for me. It's like Patrick Vieira style. So.
Thank you for your input. And we're going to be covering the midfielders on your channel. So the link to that video will be in the description. Thank you so much for sharing your builds, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be relevant for a long time. And if you want to retrain your players, your premium players are very expensive to retrain. It costs a lot of GPs. In some instances, 600,000. And just don't commit to that right now. There's going to be like it is currently as we speak, as of time recording, we can retrain players for free, and there's going to be a window to do that in the future. And I'm pretty sure people will be benefiting from that. And you might have different players, but now you get the idea what you're supposed to have from your attacking fullbacks, defensive fullbacks, destroyer, a center back, or any non-playstyle center back or build-up center back and a goalkeeper. Thank you so much, Barry. That was a great video, and I encourage everyone to subscribe to his channel and check out the second part about midfielders on his channel.